Martha Coakley is Massachusetts Attorney General. She was inside the court this morning, and she joins us now. And I'd like to ask you, Attorney General Coakley, what was the vibe in the room in terms of the idea of states' rights? Obviously, your state was one of the first to allow same-sex marriage. Did you sort of pick that up from some of the more conservative justices?
Yes, and we were the first state to allow it. We were the first Attorney General's office to challenge DOMA. And I think you heard in the questions today and the arguments, of course, this is about the plaintiff from New York, but it was about much more than that. It was about the 1,100 restrictions on the rights of same-sex couples. And we've had that history in Massachusetts now for almost 10 years. I think the focus and the questioning from many of the judges was around the impact on the lives of people, whether they are veterans, whether they are looking for Social Security. And the tenor, I think, was very interested in getting to what the impact is, not just on one plaintiff in this case, which of course is important, but what the impact of same-sex couples, particularly in states like Massachusetts where we allow it already.
One interesting aspect of this is that the part that's before the court is Section 3 of DOMA, which pertains squarely to the federal benefits and whether there's a federal argument here. I'm interested on your take. For example, let's say this is struck down. Immediately what we would see is Massachusetts, okay, that state which would allow same-sex marriage, we could see federal benefits for those couples, but it's not necessarily required that a Massachusetts same-sex marriage be honored in a state like Mississippi. How do you see this argument playing out moving forward, and do you see from this decision the possibility of a universal acceptance of same-sex marriage?
Well, yesterday's arguments were about that question, Luke, about the universal acceptance, but our question was really about a little more limited question about if a state like Massachusetts allows for that marriage, can the federal government impose a different definition on it? And that federalism question, can the federal government really do this, was argued much more extensively in our briefs and our arguments. I think it was a real question for the judges today, which was encouraging. And I, too, think that based upon, although we don't like to read the tea leaves, I think there is a very good chance, based upon the argument and the silence of some of the more conservative judges, that there are enough votes to strike down DOMA, which will allow in Massachusetts and hopefully across the country states to recognize that this is a question of basic fairness for people, and the speed with which this is changing. Even Justice Roberts noticed the sea change. I think that everybody recognizes that this is an important issue of civil rights. We've seen it in Massachusetts. There's no downside to it. So we're hopeful today that at least DOMA will be struck down, and we are more hopeful that the public has seen in this country, whether the Supreme Court sees it or not, that this is an issue of basic fairness, and that is spreading across the country in a very good and fast way.
And lastly, I'll just ask you from a political perspective, do you see it now as a benchmark of Democratic Party politics that one has to be in favor of same-sex marriage? It seems that new senators are moving over every minute. Kay Hagan of North Carolina announced today that she was supportive of it.
I would hope so. I would hope both for Democrats and for Republicans that this issue is not about politics so much as it is about what we believe in this country, about basic fairness, about not discriminating. And it is just so clear from our experience in Massachusetts, and frankly from those who are more conservative in looking at the fundamental basis of marriage as a way in which two people commit to each other, they commit to their society. That is the building block on which we believe we get stable communities. And so how ironic now that everybody is recognizing that this is good for everybody, for same-sex marriages, for the communities, for the children in those marriages. And I think the public is going to see that probably sooner than the Supreme Court, but we're going to stay looking for that decision in June.
Attorney General from Massachusetts, Martha Coakley, thanks so much for joining us.